got a special report by Frontier Africa Reports. I am hosting Amafaye. Of course, the news overnight was that Kenya's remittances for the month of February surged significantly, and one of the largest remittances, according to news report, for the year 2020 among sub-Saharan countries. And I have here for these reports Agnes, Gitau, who is a managing partner at GBS Africa. She's based in London, but she's a Kenyan. Agnes, good to have this conversation with you. Bring us up to speed how these Kenyan remittances are pacing up among the rest of SSA countries so far, 2020 and early into the new year that we're currently in.
Thank you very much, Boston. I think diaspora remittance, and we've seen continued support from the Africans in diaspora, continually sending money back home to support their families and relatives, and to some extent sending their remittance towards some investment. This has continued to grow despite the economic challenges that remittance corridors like the US, the UK, and the Middle East, despite the economic challenges these countries have saved. And also remember, most of the Africans in the diaspora, mostly working abroad, working frontline services. So suddenly greatly affected by COVID-19. However, they have continued to support their relatives back home, and a good testament is the diaspora side, Kenya diaspora side, remittance side.
Okay, so what are you learning within the Kenyan community? I'm sure you folks have some meetings, you relate with each other on telephone, other means of conversation, about how they feel passionately back at home in terms of the need to send remittances back at home, in particular for the year 2020.
I remember earlier in the year, the World Bank produced a very big report, almost predicting a decline in diaspora remittances. And fortunately for us, this has not affected the Africans. Africans have continued, to send money back home. And why is this? Suddenly it's because also our relatives are greatly affected by COVID-19. Most of them, remember, this is usually hand-to-mouth sort of work, the high rates of unemployment also caused by COVID-19. It means the dependency cycle and the dependent on the Africans in the diaspora has obviously risen. But of course, the conversation we have is how can you channel this capital to job creating sectors like education or entrepreneurship, and that's the only way you can make it sustainable. In response to this, what the Central Bank of Kenya has done is they have been surveying in partnership with organizations like ours. They've been surveying the African in the diaspora to find out, has anything changed since COVID-19? Have you increased or decreased your remittance back home? And why do you send money back home? And also what they're trying to see is, is there any changes come 2021, 2022? Do you see any likelihood in terms of the amount of money you send home? Are you going to be affected in terms of what you send home? So they're really trying to study the diaspora to understand how and why and how much they give. And with this data, then they can be informed as to how they can support diaspora remittances, but at the same time channel this money to sustainable development projects.
I'm going to ask you, I'm not sure if you have data, but in terms of just your rule of the thumb, who is sending more money back home in terms of remittances? Male Kenyans, female Kenyans?
I don't know the gender, but I can tell you that the biggest source of remittance for Kenya is the US, followed by Europe, obviously with the UK, and interestingly, we've seen a rise of diaspora remittance from the Middle East. So the US corridor, so Kenyans living in America and Kenyans living in Europe have continued at the largest source of remittance to Kenya. And something that is quite interesting is the rise of remittance from the Middle East. It shows we have so many Kenyans also going to Middle East in search of work. But in terms of gender, I would suppose it would probably be women versus the men. It would be probably more women supporting their folks back home than men.
I know, it's an African thing. On a final note, what are you hearing back at home from homeland Kenya in terms of the recipients, the friends, the families, and others? aside the government? Are you getting feedbacks? Are you hearing feedbacks about how they feel about their sons and daughters who are professionals like yourself, and those who are not so much a professional work in diaspora, who are sending remittances back at home, supporting them at a very critical and crunching times for Africa?
So obviously it's gratitude for the sons and daughters of Africans who have continued to support their folks back home in services which, if you look at it, the government should be providing. You know, services like healthcare and education, that should be the business of the government. But obviously our relatives being grateful that we are able to bridge that gap. When the government fails, then our funds are used for these causes. But another thing, Boston, which we need to investigate is that dependency cycle. They did a survey in one of the areas in Kenya where a lot of in the 90s, a lot of Kenyans from this area left for the diaspora. And what they discovered, young people or people in this part of Kenya rarely seek employment. You know why? Because they have support coming from abroad. So the dependency cycle that is created by diaspora remittance, that's another area we need to address. And we are hoping through this survey that is done by the Central Bank of Kenya that we can start addressing these areas. How can we support our Africans to be self-reliant? Look, we are talking about moving away from depending on foreign aid, but we can't move away from depending from foreign aid to now depend on diaspora remittance. So and also the burden for many of us, a lot of Africans in the diaspora, if you know from experience, they work 60-hour jobs, breaking their backs. Why? So they can support their relatives back home. And this is not just the Africans in the diaspora. I've had the same stories from the Chinese, from you know, the Latin Americans, diaspora, migrants, diaspora work so hard to support their relatives back home because of that expectation. Exactly.
Yes, the expectations that is the green, the field is greener out there and you're making more money. So I think you touch on something very important, this dependency cycle. We need to take a critical research look at it if there's a problem coming up there, or there could be a problem coming up there in which folks begin to relax on this side of the continent and they're depending heavily on those of you who are in the diaspora like yourself who have to work extra hours. Again, you've got families of your own over there to take care of, by the way. You have tax to pay, you have so many other pressures, by the way. So that is really, really understood. Thank you so much, Agnes Gitau, Managing Partner at GPS Africa, for this special report on Kenya's remittances. Thanks for speaking with us, and see you next time.